Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the political commentator Adam Boulton and senior political commentator and columnist at the Daily Telegraph, Annabel Denham. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. Welcome both. Let's take a quick look now and see what is on some of the front pages. Well, the Financial Times reports that Donald Trump has repeated his demand for control of Greenland. The Guardian leads on the US president, linking the threats to his Nobel Peace Prize snub. That story is also on the front of the Metro with the headline, "A Prize Idiot." The Times reports on the US president's claim that he no longer thinks purely about peace. The Eye reports the US-UK relationship is at its weakest since the Suez Crisis. The Telegraph says the government will consult on banning under-16s from social media. The Mail has the same story, writing Keir Starmer has paved the way for an Australian-style ban. The Express carries this on the Darlington nurses who say they will never be silenced. Meanwhile, Brooklyn Peltz Beckham says he does not want to reconcile with his family in an explosive social media post. That's on the front of The Sun. And The Star also carries that story with the headline, "Brooklyn blasts Posh and Becks." And we're joined tonight by Adam Boulton and Annabel Denham. So lots of various stories, but obviously the Greenland story has been dominating the headlines today, and it's dominating the headlines in most of the papers. Let's start with the Financial Times. And Adam, just with you, if you can start us off. Here it says Trump maintains Greenland seizure threat as trade strife with Europe rises. So that's the threat, isn't it? The increase of tariffs and just a lot of tension beyond that as well.
Yeah, very striking photograph there on the front of the FT of a Danish soldier who'd been deployed to Greenland. Of course, that appears to have been the reason which sparked Trump to send tariffs, as he sort of saw them as being sent there as kind of military opposition to him. The thrust of the Financial Times story, as you'd expect, is looking at the financial consequences of this argument, pointing out that the markets are down except for gold, which has gone up, which at times of tension tends to go up. But perhaps the impact has been relatively muted in America because it was Martin Luther King Day, which was a public holiday. But also pointing out that in an interview on NBC News, the president was asked if he would use force to take Greenland and said no comment, which is hardly reassuring for those people who don't want to see some kind of military invasion. And really all the discussion today of Greenland has centred around what Trump's been saying, both that no comment, but also this extraordinary letter that he sent to the Danish Prime Minister saying that he's no longer interested in peace, but the Norwegian Prime Minister, because Norway didn't give him the Nobel Peace Prize, but also, again, claiming to be a great peacemaker and indeed the man, he says, who's done more for NATO than anyone else, although, of course, many people think he's in the process of breaking it up.
I think if there are any doubts over his credentials or whether he was a serious contender for the Nobel Peace Prize before the apparent snub, there certainly won't be any more. I have my doubts, given his behaviour towards Putin and over Ukraine. I think he emboldened the Russian president and has prolonged that conflict. So it's no wonder that they decided not to hand him this prestigious award. But nevertheless, it's been a pretty remarkable few days, hasn't it, in international affairs. Keir Starmer has been walking a diplomatic tightrope. Let's not forget that the Prime Minister considers himself to be a bridge between Europe and the US. He called an emergency press conference this morning and really came out quite robustly in his language, even if he didn't follow it up with much in the way of policy substance. I think he wanted the British public to see that he is willing to stand up to America, despite the fact that he spent the last 18 months cultivating what has been quite a close relationship with the US president.
He still wouldn't criticise Trump by name.
No.
He was invited to criticise Trump's actions. He said no. what is being proposed is wrong without going into criticising Donald Trump.
But I wonder if he was quietly trying to compel more moderate Republicans into attempting to curtail Trump. It's remarkable that the president is able to go out on a limb like this and nobody seems able to rein him in. Now, senior figures like J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio have been very careful in the wording that they've used not to out and out endorse Trump's behaviour here. You can tell that there's some squeamish and extremely uncomfortable about it. But why is it that nobody seems able to stop him from going out on a limb like this?
Go on.
It's interesting that Sky News report you were saying there, where Starmer is trying to say to him, look, the troops that have gone in there are not to fend off America, but they're
because Trump's saying he may have been misinformed about why the troops were sent.
And that, you know, that is quite interesting. But I think, you know, Keir Starmer is really, you know, a rabbit caught in the headlights on this one, because he has clearly decided that, compared, for example, to the French, he's not going to be outspoken in his criticism. But the question is, looking at the direction of travel of Donald Trump, is he doing the right things behind the scenes in the national interest to make sure that the UK is protected? And will he actually decide that, rather than going with the Europeans, ultimately, we've only sent one officer to Greenland, he's going to try and say, well, maybe there's something to talk about.
Economically, certainly, I think that Starmer is acting in the national interest in refusing to endorse the idea of retaliatory tariffs, which the French have come out and been particularly strong on.
Can I just look at the front page of your paper, the Daily Telegraph, because they have a headline there. So on the front page of the Telegraph, it says, "Don't hit back at Trump," Prime Minister tells the EU, because the EU is responding in a way, and obviously, you know, Keir Starmer thinks that maybe there should be a different tactic.
Germans, interestingly, are closer to Britain than they are to France on this. I mean, I think one of the questions is, we were just saying this, is Starmer going to change his plans and go to Davos, where the other European leaders, including Macron, are hoping to talk to Trump? My guess is he probably won't, but then the big question will be the European Union meeting on Thursday. What sort of observer status will the UK take about that? Will they go in with the others or not?
Now, of course, back in America, Congress historically hasn't tended to block foreign or been too involved in foreign affairs, but it certainly has in financial affairs. So it's possible that the US Supreme Court will block this latest tariffs plan, which is set to take effect at the start of February. It'll begin at 10% and it'll be ratcheted up to 25% if we don't comply with the president's demands. But it's possible that actually domestically he's going to face some challenges. And if you look at polling, the Americans are somewhere between baffled, sort of disinterested and opposed to what Trump is proposing in Greenland. Both the idea that they would buy the territory and indeed that they would acquire it by some form of force. And their attitudes have soured since Trump started making overtures around Greenland when he was US president-elect. So, you know, it's not going to be plain sailing on the domestic front for the president if he does this, which is why I wonder whether we take him seriously, if not necessarily literally.
I mean, the I-paper is going with the line of just how bad British and US relationship is right now. Lowest ebb since the Suez Crisis back in 1956, front page of the I. Adam. Yeah,
although it's not quite the same, is it, that Britain and the US, and indeed Britain and France, fell out with the US in Suez, basically because the Americans told the old imperial powers not to throw their weight around. Now we've clearly got the US throwing its weight around, and the diminished powers, if you like, of the US and France and the others don't really know how to react to this, given the importance. And I think, you know, the key thing is we're talking about European Union meetings or meeting of European leaders at Davos. The real crisis here is a split in NATO, because you've got one NATO member wanting to take the territory of another NATO member, whereas NATO was basically formed to say, we've all got what we've got and we're going to join together to protect us from outsiders. Yet he's coming in as a threat there. So I'm not sure the parallels quite.
I mean, interesting. In 1956, it was the UK that sort of invaded Egypt. So here it's almost like the other way around, with no one really to rein in the United States, and that's the wake-up call for Europe. And by Europe, I don't just mean the EU. I mean, you know, all of us, the continent.
Well, it's the latest wake-up call. I think there have been several ever since Putin sent his tanks across the border into Ukraine. It became blindingly obvious that we were living in an increasingly dangerous world in which Western countries, European countries, needed to significantly increase their defence spending. But unfortunately, we've seen very little action to match the rhetoric on, on that front. And what it has meant is Trump frustrated now that he has returned to the White House, and European leaders finding it very difficult to have much sway with the US president.
I mean, it was interesting at the news conference that sitting in the front row were the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, and the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, both looking absolutely pig-sick, frankly. I mean, I think it's very clear that it's a very, very difficult situation, and the government has simply not worked out which way.
I mean, Annabel, but I think you're a veteran of many a prime ministerial news conference over the years. How would you rate this in the worry that you saw on Keir Starmer's face?
Well, I think, you know, we've seen all sorts of prime ministers who are very, very certain, or give the impression of certainty, often perhaps wrongly, as you might say with Liz Truss, for example. But incidentally, Robert Jenrick said tonight he would have kicked Liz Truss out of the Tory party, which seems to be an odd coda. But anyway, Keir Starmer just seems the most hesitant and the most cautious. And you know, at times of national crisis, I think people do look for leadership, and I'm not sure he's providing it in compared to some of his predecessors. I mean, he's more like, frankly, reminds me most of Theresa May. As we know, that didn't end happily.
Annabel?
Well, one of his many nicknames is No Drama Star, and I think what he is urging here is calm discussion, calm engagement, and, you know, you're talking about the extremely irascible and capricious Donald Trump, and, you know, is he really prepared for the challenge of handling the US president at a time when he's being perhaps even more unpredictable than normal? But, you know, to the eye, I think, you know, there have been various points ever since, you know, throughout the post-war period where the British and the US relationship has become extremely tense, not just Suez, but Vietnam and Grenada as well. You know, that had a serious impact temporarily on the relationship between Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan.
But in each of those cases, you know, we knew where we stood vis-à-vis the United States, and this time
we don't.
I mean, Annabel used the word capricious, I think, to describe Donald Trump. The Metro used a different word. So front page of the Metro, a prize idiot. And this, again, going back to this letter that he sent to the Norwegian Prime Minister, I don't know what the word would be, petty, childish, all about this Nobel Peace Prize that he got anyway because the Venezuelan opposition leader effectively gave it to him. You know, we always talk about trying to analyse Donald Trump, but ultimately, is it just a fool's errand trying to second-guess what he might do?
No, I mean, it's the most extraordinarily petulant letter that, you know, could have been written by a 10-year-old, frankly. I mean, I think one of the things we don't quite understand about Donald Trump is his absolute obsession with Barack Obama, which I do think has roots in, you know, if not racism, racist instincts. You know, he has never been able to reconcile himself to the fact that Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize, which is why he's been...
I think Obama also made fun of him once at some correspondence
dinner. Yeah, at a correspondence dinner.
Got over that one.
And also, you know, we've seen him, you know, pathetically trying to reconstruct that famous photograph of Obama and his team in the Situation Room when the operation was mounted against Osama bin Laden, and he's repeatedly tried to do sort of strikes to match that, and of course the latest one, and you know it's a mental state of mind. I mean,
trying to psychoanalyse Donald Trump is fraught with risks, isn't it? The dangers of trying to do so, but For someone who considers himself to be a strong man and who considers that, that is how, it's in shows of strength that you get what you want on the international stage, he's an extremely sensitive individual who seemingly takes criticism and rejection to heart and holds on to these sorts of things. But nevertheless, I do wonder if the Nobel Peace Prize is a slight sideshow, that Donald Trump has insisted that MAGA 2.0 will be all about acting in America's national interest, and that he considers the minerals in Greenland and the fact that it would be an important security asset to America to be in their national interest, and that is why he is pursuing it.
I mean, that handover of the medal, if not the prize, by Machado has... I mean, anyone who's looked at social media is just full of memes of Donald Trump claiming the Golden Boot, Donald Trump claiming all the Winter Olympics medals, and doubtless he'll claim the World Cup when he hosts that in the summer.
We'll have to wait and see. OK, well, let's leave it for now, but obviously that is what we'll be discussing over the next week as everyone meets in Davos. Now, we're also going to be talking about the government's proposed plans to ban social media for under 16s. That's coming up next. Stay with us.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
These slums, once gripped by fear and death.
There is far less bloodshed now, but it hasn't gone away.
Who's asking you to kill?
The police will give me the orders, and after I kill the target, I throw the gun away.
We try our best to uncover and unpick a fast-changing and deeply complex region.
These large waterways provided an excellent source of body disposal.
This is the Buriganga River, where victims who'd allegedly been shot dead were dumped.
Sheikh Hasina, how confident are you that she will stand trial?
She will stand trial, there's no doubt about that.
We're going to take you to the very heart of a criminal network, going undercover inside Southeast Asia's scam centres for the very first time.
We won't have any problems with police, it's okay.
Just seen Imran Khan leave, and as we understand it, he's just been shot in the leg.
They have decided that the only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
Sky News get the full story first.
Chinese vessels start encircling the boat we're on, blocking its path.
The Chinese are now deploying water cannons, firing it directly towards our boat. We've discovered doctors across Delhi dishing out pills like this, claiming they will provide a lifelong cure for homosexuality.
Rohingya people fleeing an escalating civil war.
The situation here in Cox's is desperate. An already insecure place does feel a lot more precarious.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Big Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
You're watching the press preview with me in the studio, Adam Boulton and Annabel Denham. So let's just start with the Daily Telegraph. Annabel, let's start with you because it's your paper. So British teenagers face social media ban. Now, there's been a lot of talk of trying to copy what Australia has done, which is to ban social media for 16-year-olds. And now we're hearing that the government is going to launch a consultation on this.
We are. Now, just a few weeks ago, the Tories came out and said that were they ever to get near the levers of power again, they would bring in a social media ban for the under-16s. At the time, the Labour government maintained that it was not entertaining this idea. Bridget Phillips, the Education Secretary, saying that she didn't feel it was a necessary step. However, it's now looking set to be Labour's latest U-turn. They've decided they are going to launch a consultation on social media for under-16s. And they're coming under an enormous amount of pressure from all sorts of groups, you know, families of younger children, who are perhaps parents who are struggling to get their kids off their phones, from families who are sort of bereaved, who their children may have died as a consequence of social media in some way, not to mention, of course, the Conservatives coming out and saying that this is something they would support. Now, you know, the slight issue, I think, is if you look at what's happening in Australia, they've had to bring in so many carve-outs, and there are many, many exemptions, that the law actually is not especially robust. And my concern is that were we to try and do something similar here in the UK, it would give parents almost a false sense of security, where there are ways for young people to get around the ban, or there are these exemptions, which means that they can still access social media, and parents are sitting there thinking, well, it's fine, it's safe, it's been banned, and therefore there's no way that my child can get online. So I still think there will be a role for old-fashioned parenting. And it also sort of begs the question, we've just had the government bring in the Online Safety Act, which is very wide-ranging legislation to try and make the online world safer, particularly for younger people. Now, if it's also necessary to ban social media for the under-16s, surely that law that we've just brought in, all of that legislation, is in some way flawed. So do we now need the government to go back and address that and maybe loosen it? You know, they've had a lot of complaints from technology companies that it's too burdensome, that it's anti-competitive, anti-innovation.
Because to a lot of parents, it would seem like a no-brainer. But, Adam, there are people that say you need this consultation because there would be issues with it.
Yeah, I mean, it does, as Annabel says, look a bit like another potential U-turn, because certainly Peter Kyle, when he was the science minister, and Keir Starmer argued that it was going too far to have a ban because there were proper uses of phones and social media that children ought to be exposed to, since they are a reality. And I think, you know, things are really chasing each other. It was certainly a blow to this announcement by the government when Ian Russell, the father of Molly Russell, who committed suicide after being exposed to stuff on social media, actually said he didn't back a ban. He felt that children had to be exposed to modern social media because they're a reality, unless you're going to ban phones altogether, which no one's going to do.
Yeah.
But also,
they want to keep them out of schools, though.
Yeah, but also this point that if you impose bans from the outside, even if the companies go along with them, they're not looking at themselves at all. They're just simply saying, OK, well, it's been banned, we're going to carry on our merry way, and these companies are banning things, whereas he argues that actually it's the platforms who've got to face up to...
Well, you've got so many problems with enforcement as well.
Yeah, enforcement, but also got to face up to social responsibility.
One last story in quickly. Front page of The Sun, Brooklyn goes nuclear. This is Brooklyn pelts Beckham. Annabel, what's happened here?
Well, look, there's been speculation for months, hasn't there, over some sort of rupture between Brooklyn and his wife, Nicola Peltz, and the rest of the Beckham family. And now it appears to have come to a head because he's launched this attack on his parents, being extremely disparaging. He was absent from David's 50th birthday party last year. So I don't think this is altogether surprising. I personally find it very unedifying when people who are in the public eye, and even if there's somebody like Brooklyn Beckham who's not chosen to be in the public eye, he has famous parents, nevertheless feel it necessary to air their dirty laundry.
He wrote a social media post.
Six pages on social media. Interesting, coming days after the Peltz and his main media advisor resigned. So he's gone his own way.
We'll see how that develops. Adam Boulton, Annabel Denham, thank you both so much. I'll see you just in a few minutes, top of the hour. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, Sky News has learned that Donald Trump has conceded to Keir Starmer that he may have been misinformed about why European countries sent troops to Greenland.